Ladies and gentlemen, Baruch Habayim, welcome all. It's great to see you all today. My name is Jason Moldoff. It's a pleasure to have so many of you here today for our Yiddish Poetry Hour. Thank you so much for coming. Janelle, thank you for bringing your class. I am honored to be doing this with my friend Dillon Wilson, who taught the communication courses before me, and it has been a pleasure to work with you, sir, on creating this Poetry Hour. Who here looked at that quiz and said, I recognize some of these words. I've heard some of these words before. Who's heard none of these words? Who says, I've never heard one of these words before? A lot of you. I've never heard before. Okay. Who thinks they got a bunch right? Yeah? Let me give you the answers, and I want to tell you and say for you what the answers are. Today we're going to be taking you on a journey through Yiddish poetry and Jewish culture. I'm Jewish. My grandparents, Irma and Jerry Jacobson, to whom I'm dedicating this, spoke Yiddish when they were growing up, and they still speak a little bit of Yiddish from time to time. And Yiddish, for those of you that don't know, is the language of the Jews in everyday talk. It is the language of the street for the Jews. As opposed to Hebrew, Hebrew being the language of the Bible and the Torah, the language of religious prayer. This is the how you doing type talk. This is the how's everything going type language. You know what I mean? As opposed to the formal praising God type stuff. Yiddish is the language of the street. So, bris. Who got bris right? Bris is what? Tell me. The bris is the circumcision. The bris is the snipping of the young male's penis at 8 days old. Yes. I remember mine. It was awful. I couldn't walk for a year and a half after my bris. Couldn't talk for a year and a half afterwards. It was just booby. What's a booby or a bubala? Grandmother. Very good. Grandmother. That's my booby. That's my booby. Yes. Bupkis. Anyone know bupkis? Bupkis means nothing. I got nothing. What did you get for Hanukkah? Bupkis. I got nothing for Hanukkah. Chazarai. Can you say chazarai for me? Chazarai. Chazar. You gotta give a cha. Chazarai. That's right. If you have napkins for these people, but they're spitting. Chazarai is G, worthless items. You go to the state fair and you see what they got for sale. Look at this chazarai. They got worthless items for sale. Who knows what chutzpah is? Chutzpah. Tell me what it is. Chutzpah is N, meaning what? Guts. Boy, he's got some chutzpah. He's got some guts. He's got some, you know what, some bravery to do this. Drek. Drek is junk. Farblungit, many of you probably don't know, is confused. Verklempt. Does anybody know verklempt? Verklempt is P. Very good, Janelle. I'm so verklempt, I can't even talk about this anymore. I'm so choked up, I'm so verklempt. You can see the beauty and the majesty of these words. Gesundheit. Bless you. Very, very good. Klutz. Clumsy. Klutz. Clumsy person. Someone who trips over chairs, right? Kvetch. Kvetch. Kvetch is T. Kvetch is someone who complains. He's such a kvetch. He's always kvetching about stuff. Yes. A mensch. Mensch is mensch is V. Anybody get V for mensch? An upstanding person. You want to be a mensch. You want to be a good upstanding. My son is such a mensch. That's what you say. Yes. Meshugi. Meshugana. Meshugana is not O. No? Anybody get Meshugana? Means crazy. Meshugana means crazy. Nevish. Nevish is a simpleton. That guy's a simpleton. You guys must have heard oy vey before, yes? Oy vey. Who knows oy vey? B, very, very good. Putz. Putz is a dirty, unclean penis or dirty, unclean person. We got a lot of dirty penis words in Yiddish. We like to talk about genitalia and dirty things in Yiddish. Schlep. Schlep is H, to drag along. You gotta come all this way. You gotta schlep all the way down. Everything in Yiddish is a struggle. You understand? Everything is difficult to do. I had to schlep on down. They had all this chazarai at the state fair. I met a bunch of putzes, okay? And there were people tripping. There were klutzes. This is the life of the Jewish person. To schmooze. Schmooze is F. Very good. To converse, let's go schmooze with the people who started the show. Schmuck is O. Ashanda is a shame. Schmutz is dirt. Anybody get schmutz, dirt? Spiel is what we're doing today, which is a sales pitch or a speech. Did you hear his spiel? That's the word. Shtick. Shtick is you, Janelle, honorary Jew today. And Janelle's getting all these answers right. Oh, is that right? Shtick is you. Schwitz. This summer it was so hot I was schwitzing. I was sweating. And you can go to a schwitz. You can go to the YMCA and they got a sauna. That's the schwitz. I need a schwitz. I need to empty my pores. That's the type of thing that happens there. A tchotchke is Q, a little trinket, and Zadie is grandfather. Who got 5 or more right? 5 or more right. Congratulations. You are honorary Jews today. 5 or more right. Anybody know Schlemiel and Schlemazel, those 2 bonus ones? Anybody define the Schlemiel and Schlemazel? I'll tell you the story of the Schlemiel and Schlemazel, so you know the difference. This is from Laverne and Shirley. You see this stuff, Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Hassan Pfeffer. There you go. Thank you, Benay. The Schlemiel is a story of a waiter. The waiter goes over and he's bringing the hot tea to the table, and he trips and the hot tea comes flying out. That guy is the Schlemiel. He's clumsy, he's a fool, he causes bad things to happen. The guy whose lap it ended up on is the Schlemazel. He gets all the bad things happen to him. He's a bad luck type of person. So I hope you've enjoyed these words. Today what we're going to be doing is speaking mostly in English. It's not really in Yiddish, so that you understand what exactly the poets meant and what the songwriters meant by their tunes. To begin, and Dylan will be joining us in just a second, to begin I want to share with you one of the older poems, older Yiddish poems by Avraham Reisen. The original Yiddish poems were biblical, were concerned with religious stories. Before you start talking about day-to-day life, they were parables and stories. So let's listen to this person give a little poem.
Gegangen ist Jakob kein Charan, zu machen sich dort a gezelt, bis ist vermattet geworden und ruhen geblieben im Feld. Die Sonne ist in Marv vergangen, es ist dunkel geworden und kiel. Geschwebt in der Luft haben Klangen, von Ergetz der Weit und der Still. In Feld ist bloß einer, doch fühlt ist nicht allein. Seht, als der Ort ist bloß Steiner, hat sich gelegt auf ein Stein. Geworfen, ein Blick voll mit Schalom, zufrieden mit Steiner im Weg, und satt im Gechalmt Achalom, was gleicht bis die ewigste Tag. Auf der Erde ist gestanden ein Leiter, der spitz bis in Himmel allein. Melachim wie seine Begleiter, sie steigen da aus und da ein. Und plötzlich ein Wunder inmitten hat Gott sich bewiesen allein, zu schützen und trösten und hitten, dem Wagler, was schläft auf ein Stein.
When you hear that, what does it sound like to you? You hear the chokloks? What other language does this sound like to you? German. It sounds a lot like German, yes? These people were German Jews, were Eastern European Jews who needed a way to talk day to day and yet have an identity, have a Jewish identity, yet still be German, or still be Italian or Eastern European. The story of the Jewish and Yiddish experience is one of, am I going to express my Judaism, or am I going to be like everybody else? And that's the story of American Judaism too. So when people came to this country, they came, do I celebrate myself? Do I become and show that I'm a Jew? Or do I hide and assimilate? Do I come and just be like everybody else for fear of ostracism, for fear of, because let's face it, the Jews have faced a whole bunch of persecution in their lives. You don't maybe want to come out and say, hello everybody, the Jews are here. Maybe that's not such a safe thing to be doing. Dylan, would you start us off by telling us about Morris Rosenfeld and what his contributions were?
Now, Morris Rosenfeld made his way to London and then to New York. He worked as a tailor in the clothing factories, and this is so important, his poetry expressed the bitterness of sweatshop conditions and its effect on the softer ranges of human feeling. But he is known as the first Yiddish poet to gain international fame.
Very good. So in his life in America, he comes here with the ideas. You know the idea, the streets are paved with gold, it's going to be a great opportunity, I'm coming here, 20th century. Not so much when they come here. To New York, they come and they're in the sweatshop. So our first poem that we'll be reading for you today is The Sweatshop on your first page of your pamphlet. Yes, please. You got a pamphlet. Do we have extra pamphlets?
We have one left.
Young lady. Thank you very much.
Yes, may I
Pay attention here to the three levels of the early Jewish experience that Morris talks about. Corner of pain and anguish, there's a worn old house. Tavern on the street floor, Bible room upstairs. Scoundrels sit below and all day long they souse. On the floor above them, Jews sob out their prayers. Higher on the third floor, there's another room. Not a single window welcomes the sun. Seldom does it know the blessing of a broom. Rottenness and filth are blended into one. Toiling without let-up in that sunless den, nimble-fingered and, or so it seems, content, sit some 30 blighted women, blighted men, with their spirits broken and their bodies spent. Scurfhead struts among them, always with a frown, acting like his royal highness in a play, for the shop is his, and here he wears the crown, and they must obey him, silently obey. You see the people praying in the building, you see them drinking, and you see them working, all in these tight sweatshop conditions. This is the life of the early immigrants, not strictly a Jewish experience. Our Italian and Irish immigrants, people that came here as well, dealt with this. I thought this was a nice poem to share, to discuss what their experience was like. We're going to go back to Abraham Rice now, and Dillon's going to read this poem called Future Generations. It talks about the songs of the Jews. If you know Jewish music at all, a lot of it is in a minor key. Do we have any musicians in here? What does it mean to have a song in the minor key? It's a sad song. A lot of songs in Jewish liturgy are sad. They're wailing. They're hopeful but longing. And so this poem really expresses that. Dillon?
Future generations. Future generations, brothers still to come, don't you dare be scornful of our songs. Songs about the weak, songs of the exhausted in a poor generation. Before the world's decline, we were all imbued with the idea of freedom, yet sang our songs about it with voices lowered. Far from our good fortune, we met at night in darkness and worked at building bridges in secrecy. We hid from the foes who lay in wait for us, and this is why our songs resonate with grief, and why our melodies have a dismal longing and a hidden rage in their warp and their woof.
Thank you. So I think this paints a pretty good picture of what they're going through, right? They're coming here, hopeful and opportunity. They've left their families back in Germany, back in Russia, for a new life, and yet they're sweating, and yet they're hiding. They're hiding and needing to figure out what is my place in this new world. Our next poem also deals with identity, and it's The First Cigarette. Dillon, would you like to tell us about Joseph Rolnick?
Joseph Rolnick settled permanently in New York in 1906, just to give us a little time frame when all of this was taking place, and was the first of the American Yiddish poets to refine a body of verse evocative of old country memories. And this is important, especially for this poem, both for the memories and the landscapes. And he is one of the poets who began to show a preference for natural diction, sparse imagery, and simple themes that were very personal in nature.
Very good. Listen here to the tension. Imagine you're 13 years old, growing up in New York City, and you're one of several Jews. There are Jews, but there's also these other people. There's also these people who do things that you are not supposed to be doing. And you're 13 years old, don't you want to try them? The first cigarette. By the way, the Sabbath in Judaism starts on Friday night. So when he talks about Sabbath, he means Friday night. My first Sabbath cigarette between my lips, one frosty Friday night. Didn't taste awfully good. I snorted and coughed, but had to give it a drag. This I took to be my first transgression. So too Shlomi Raskus, her son, got up from his mother's Sabbath table to eat pig at the Gentiles' place. But that sensitive young kid couldn't stomach stale pork. He gagged and felt sick. And all our young generation, we were loud with foul talk behind girls' backs and women's dresses. We troubled the sleep of the pious, knocking store signs over, and did lots of things we didn't like, all because we wanted to rouse God's wrath. Being pricked on by our 16 years, the way ripe oats will prick a horse. And God, who watched over us all, God against whom we talked with such impudence, sat there on his throne in heaven and laughed into his deep white beard. What we'd like to do now is give you a sense of the songs, the ones in the minor key, the ones that detail this longing and the emotion you felt as an immigrant Jew. This is a song called My Yiddish Mama. It was made famous by Sophie Tucker, sung by Al Jolson, sung by a number of famous people. It's a song to your mother, who you've disappointed. A common Jewish theme. I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry I smoked that cigarette. I'm sorry I ate the pork. I'm sorry you've worked so hard for me and I have not done enough for you. This is Neil Sedaka singing that song in both Yiddish and in English.
Plays it about my mom. And ladies and gentlemen, Neil Sedaka singing My Yiddish Mama.
Things I should be thankful for, I've had a goodly share. And as I sit here in the comfort of a cozy chair, my fancy takes me to a humble east side tenement, 3 flights up in the rear to where my childhood days were spent. It wasn't much like paradise, but mid the dirt and all, there sat the sweetest angel, one that I fondly call my Yiddish Mama. Es gibt nicht besser in der Welt, a Yiddish Mama. Oi weh, wie bitte, wenn sie fällt. Wie schön und lichtig ist in Heis, wenn die Mamas du. Wie treurig finster wird, wenn Gott nimmt auf vollem Habu. In Wasser und Feier wollt sie gern laufen für ihr Kind. it halt en taie, dus is gewiss der größte Sinn. Oi, wie glücklich und reich es der Mensch was hat, als schöne Vertune geschenkt von Gott. Nur ein altes jiddische Mama, oh Mama of mine, my Yiddish Mama, I need her more than ever now. My Yiddish Mama, I love to kiss her wrinkled brow. I long to hold her hand once more, as in days gone by, and ask her to forgive me for things I did that made her cry. How few were her pleasures. She never cared for fashion style. Her jewels and her treasures, she found them in her baby's smile. Oh, I know that I owe what I am today to that dear little lady, so old and gray, to that wonderful Yiddish mama.
You hear that longing, that guilt, that is just, that is making me schwitz right now, hearing that. I gotta call my mother and my grandmother after this and tell them I love them. Dylan, would you take us through the next couple poems, please?
How many of you knew that Neil Sedaka could sing in Yiddish? Good. A few of you did. As we moved along in identifying some of the poetry, some of the Yiddish poetry that evolved here in America and also in Eastern Europe during the early part of the 20th century, we had the Yiddish poets attempting to come to terms with some of the trends and some of the work that was being done as we moved into what we call the modernist or the modern period of poetry. But what you have to keep in mind is that the Jewish Yiddish writers were having to work in a much more concentrated time frame than, say, the English poets and the American poets, because of all of the persecution, because of all of the executions, because of all of the dangers that these people in Eastern Europe, as well as working with the assimilation process in America, had to deal with. So it's very concentrated, but they certainly made the effort to try to come to terms with what was happening in the field of literature, and especially in the field of poetry. And many of you have studied in your English classes, when you've been working with some of the modern poems, you probably encountered the word, the imagists. And this was a school of modern poets who focused on being as concise with their language as they could possibly be and still create a strong image. And many of you recognize the short poem by William Carlos Williams that best represents this, I think, as far as the English and American poets. Many of you have heard this. So much depends on a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. That's it. That's the poem. But the intent was to create this strong image. Well, let me tell you, we had some Yiddish poets who were not going to be left behind. And one of those was Anna Margolin. And she made her way through different parts of the world before finally settling in New York. And she worked kind of within this framework of the images. So we have the little poem titled Slender Ships. Slender ships drowse on swollen green water. Black shadows sleep on the cold heart of water. All the winds are still. Clouds shift like ghosts in the speechless night. The earth, pale and calm, awaits thunder and lightning. I will be still. Can't rule Anna Margolin out of the modern poetry framework and the work with the images. I will briefly mention one other poet. You do not have this in your program, but there was another Yiddish poet by the name of Mani Lee, and his work somewhat paralleled this concept of the images. And I would like to read just a brief poem of his before we move on. It's titled Indian Summer. The bonfire of my Indian summer burns in drops of gold and into smoke rings. And now I scrape the final star of cold, wordless and pious, with a darkened hand. And night and villages, on lunar flutes, crickets are playing sadness on my soul. On white grass by the blossoming hedges, yellow as the moons, the pumpkins roll. And trees, blue wax, glow in cool nudity like tall candles, or awestruck before God. Silence marks sharply the fall of dead leaves, sharper the trouble wherein I have trod. I just couldn't leave this wonderful little poem as part of our presentation.
Very good,
Where do
Tim.
we go now?
Thank you so much. Folks, we'd like to turn the page now to God of Mercy by Kaja Molodovsky. Molodovsky sounds a lot like my last name, Moldoff. When you came to this country, as many of you know, your name was changed. Molodovsky, Molodvansky, became Smith, you know, whatever. They changed it for you. So maybe I could be related in some way to this lady. Can you tell us a little bit about Kaja's life, please?
Well, Kaja Molodovsky is considered one of the best known women Yiddish poets. At one time, she received recognition of the highest order in terms of her work, both with children's poetry and with adult poetry. She's very modern. She's quite confessional. And she is also known for her exploration of women's themes. She was deeply attached to Jewish folkways, and she wrote of the Jewish experience during the Second World War and then the birth of Israel, as it is after.
So let me take you to an experience that I had going to Israel, been a couple times now, and going to Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem, which actually came up last night in the debates, is the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Israel. And if you've never been to one in America, I'd certainly recommend you visit one. This one is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And you go through and you see, as you've got the picture there, these piles of shoes, and you see the medical things that were used against my ancestors and against 6 million Jews to test them, to do horrible things to them, to gas them. And I remember going through this my first time and talking to my tour guide afterwards, because many of you may know this, in Christian and Muslim and Jewish traditions, the Jews are referred to as the chosen people. We're called the chosen ones. And I remember leaving this memorial and saying to my tour guide, is there another definition for chosen? Is there some other meaning behind that? Because seriously, can't they choose somebody else? Honestly, right? We've been through the Inquisition, we've been through destruction of temples and anti-Semitism. Now we've got 6 million dead. Choose somebody else. So I was really pleased that Dillon brought this poem to my attention by Kaja, God of Mercy. O God of mercy, choose another people. We are tired of death, tired of corpses. We have no more prayers. Choose another people. We have run out of blood for victims. Our houses have been burned into desert. The earth lacks space for tombstones. There are no more lamentations nor songs of woe in the ancient texts. God of mercy, sanctify another land, another Sinai. We have covered every field and stone with ashes and holiness, with our crones, with our young, with our infants. We have paid for each letter in your commandments. God of mercy, lift up your fiery brow, look on the peoples of the world. Let them have the prophecies in the holy days, who mumble your words in every tongue. Teach them the deeds and the ways of temptation. God of mercy, to us give rough clothing, of shepherds who tend sheep, of blacksmiths at the hammer, of washerwomen, cattle slaughterers, and lower still. And God of mercy, grant us one more blessing. Take back the divine glory of our genius. She's praying, strip us of any inkling that we have a special